Also, everyone grab some alcohol. It will help.
So we're ready? Yeah. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the Data Science Women Meetup. Big thank you to Solemn Consulting for this awesome space and delicious food. I see a lot of new faces and familiar faces, which I'm really happy about. So a quick note, if you haven't already, if you message any of the organizers on Meetup with your email, you can join the Slack community where we have these Meetup-wide events like this. And we also have smaller study groups that focus on specific topics that are organized inside designated Slack channels. And it's a great way to stay connected and share tips and resources. So I'm very excited to be having this fireside chat today with Payal Rohira. She's a principal data scientist at Solemn Consulting, and I'll be asking a few questions I've gotten from the members, covering a range of topics, and at the end, we'll have some time to take Q&A from you guys. So as we're going through this, if you have any questions, make sure to jot them down because we'll get to them at the end. So to start off, Payal, could you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background and just like your current role?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm so excited to do this and thank you everyone for coming here today. This is a pretty good group of people and hopefully it's the start of many meetups to come. And the start of us building a village of women and men who support women to support each other. So I'm super excited for that. My name is Payal. For those that don't know, that's pronounced like a pile of data or a pile of data science projects. I'm an immigrant. I moved here from India to go to school. And I've been here 15 years plus. I have 10 plus years of data science experience, and I also have an MBA and an MS in statistics. So that's all the boring stuff.
Can you talk a little about your current role?
Yeah, current role. Okay, so I'm at Solemn, which is where you guys are at right now. I am actually a solution architect here, and I was brought in to help start up the data science team with some of our senior leaders within this practice. I've been here for 6 months, and my role, couple areas that I focus on, day-to-day foundational stuff. So that's the consulting, working with clients, which is the most important part of our business. I also do a lot of what we call practice development. So that's focused on things like education for everyone within the Denver office on what data science is, recruiting and hiring is another piece of my work as well. And so I'm part of the team that looks at different data scientists and determines the capabilities and the qualifications that we look for, and then goes through the interview process.
Thank you. We're really happy to have you here. And I'm sure a lot of people find it very inspiring to have someone in a senior role who's a woman. So we're very happy. Also, I forgot to note, we have some business cards from Megan, who's a recruiter here. So if you guys have a resume or if you want to take a business card, it's in the kitchen island over there. So awesome. So could you talk also about what's kind of your story and your journey towards where you are now?
Yeah, so that's the more interesting part. As I said, I'm an immigrant. I left India because I was looking for independence, both from a family that I'm super close to, but it's definitely good to sort of head out on your own and build your own identity, right? It's also hard for women in the professional world in India, so that's one of the reasons that I came here and I stayed. Fun fact about me, when I was in high school, I actually didn't enjoy mathematics, or rather thought that I didn't. I had all this fear in my head about numbers, and it was only later on in life that I discovered mathematics and statistics and completely fell in love. And that's why I'm here today.
That's super great. So what kind of was your path? Like, what steps did you take up to this role at Solemn now?
Sure. So I was in management consulting. That's where I started out first when I got out of school. I was at a big consulting firm. I did it for a year and a half. I was working 60 to 80-hour weeks. So I reached a point where I took the number of hours that I was working and divided it by my salary and realized I was making less than minimum wage, which is the point when I decided I need to get the F out of here. went back to school, and that's when I did my Master's of Science in Statistics, and decided to go more technical. So glad I did that. Then I joined a startup out in Broomfield called Data Logics. I was one of the first 3 or 4 data scientists in that team. I helped grow some of the teams within the data science org. By the time I left, there were 200 plus data scientists, and I believe that that team is still hiring. And so I left them, joined Slalom 6 months ago, and the rest is history.
That's great. So throughout this path, what were kind of your greatest challenges as a data scientist, or even now as your current role as like a more like manager role?
Yeah, so challenges, I'd say 2. The first one is just being a female in a technical field is not easy. I'm sure you all will have felt this at some point, right? You feel underestimated a lot when you go into meetings. And then there's also the inclusion factor, which is I've been in many a meeting where, you know, I've said something and the man in the meeting has said the same exact thing. And guess who everyone listens to? Isn't me. And so, you know, it's hard to have found my voice. It's hard to be able to find that. And you have to fight for it. You have to be your own advocate and you have to find advocates. So I'd say that's sort of been one of the most difficult things that I've encountered.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us are very curious about that because obviously you're successful now and you're at a higher role. So what kind of like tips or tricks do you have to share for women who are trying to succeed in this field?
I'd say perseverance. Perseverance in the face of things that might feel very disappointing or very hard. Because a lot of us here, especially in the data science field, are pioneers, right? We're the first women data scientists that are going out there and building something new. And that's always hard. But imagine how much easier it will be for the next generation of data scientists that are female to come if we persevere and build the road. So perseverance is a big one for me. Another one I'd say is definitely finding advocates. And so there are mentors, there are people that can help you learn things. And then there are advocates or champions, people that can find you opportunities and open doors for you. It's very, very important to find that within an organization. And both men and women, right? It's hard to find women in senior roles. And it's also interesting because there are a lot of men out there who have wives or daughters or just interested in helping women and giving them sort of a step up or giving them an equal opportunity at least to get forward, to move forward. So I'd say perseverance and finding your advocates is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why I'm really glad we're having this meetup because I know I'm talking around with people here and a lot of people are like the only female data scientists or only female data analysts in their team. And when they meet other people, you're like, wow, there's actually a lot of people in data who are women in Denver. So I'm glad you guys can all come together. And like Payal mentioned, definitely being the pioneers is a little bit more difficult. But as we kind of establish a bigger presence in data science as women, it'll be easier and easier for next generation. So I'm super grateful for all of you.
Totally.
Yeah. So another question that a lot of people were having was what kind of skills you think will be the most valuable in the near future or in like a few years? And how can aspiring data scientists best prepare for that?
So that's an interesting question. I'm going to talk about the life cycle of a data science project and walk through each phase to explain where I think we are going in the future and what skill sets are required, right? So you start off with data. You have a bunch of data that you're trying to make into a form that you can use for modeling purposes. That is a challenge that a lot of companies have today and will continue having. So being able to wrangle data both using SQL and or Python will continue to be very important as a skill set. And the next piece is you have all of your data, you start to build models, right? What I've seen is that that's getting more and more automated. And so the everyday models potentially will be automated by various companies. But that is not to say that we still don't need data scientists that can do some of the cutting edge data science, right? Like we can't automate NLP yet because there's a lot of judgment required in building NLP models. Reinforcement learning is another example. We haven't automated that yet because it's still cutting edge in terms of its applications in the business world. So from the modeling perspective, people who can understand the differences between models and understand the value of the models and how to validate them, but also data scientists that can really solve for cutting edge technologies. The last piece that I'll talk about is bringing value. So a lot of companies right now, and I'm sure many of you are experiencing this, want to use AI or data science or machine learning, and haven't really thought through what that means in terms of its application to solve for a business problem. And so that's a big piece of it, right? That's a skill set that is absolutely required, is like, how do you take a data science model and solve for it or build it in a way that you're actually solving for a business problem?
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. Because people might be a little bit afraid, like, hey, my job's being automated even as a data scientist. But yeah, really that mindset, problem solving, having that domain knowledge, and being able to connect all the pieces together and differentiate what model works best for the situation is super important. So do you have any advice for people who aren't in a job yet, but want to start developing those skills? How do they do that without already being in a job in data science?
Build models, in your time off. Go on Kaggle. There are competitions out there that you can do. Don't try to do everything at once. Data science is such a vast field that nobody knows everything when it comes to data science. So pick 2 or 3 areas and really hone in on those areas and code, build models, test those models, figure out how you would apply them in a business setting, and you should be good to go.
Awesome. So, like you said, a lot of people don't really know what's data science. Sometimes, it's a very broad field. Like, what's the differences? So, can you talk a little bit about what are kind of the subfields in data science, and what's the difference between statistics and machine learning and stuff like that?
Yeah. So, first question. One thing I want to talk about is data science is becoming a very ubiquitous word. Everyone uses it and calls themselves a data scientist, right? So I've heard people who build PowerPoint decks and present them, and it's about a data science product. They are called data scientists. And then there are people who have PhDs in data science or PhDs in a particular field in data science, and they're called data scientists. So where do you fit? And I think it's important that you figure out what your brand is and hone in on that, because being a data scientist can mean anything. The difference between machine learning, statistics, and what else?
The subfields in data science.
So there's a lot of fields in data science. I'll just talk to machine learning versus statistics, right? Statistics is you build a model once or potentially a couple times by hand. And machine learning is sort of a combination of statistics and computer science. So you can build a model iteratively and fit to something and then solve for the problem. I actually have a deck that I would love to present at some point to this group on the differences, but high level, that's what it is.
Awesome. So another question that we have is, where do you see the field of data science going, and what are the coolest things that you're most excited about?
So there's a lot of cool stuff out there. There's self-driving cars, there's IoT, there's all of this really cool stuff. But what is exciting to me is the ability to make machine learning or apps that use machine learning as part of my everyday life, right? If you all think about it, my alarm goes off and I'm using Alexa for my alarm. So there's machine learning right there for you, or deep learning, right? I use GPS to get to work because I've only been here 6 months and I suck at directions. So don't tell anyone. And then, when I go to the gym, I'm using apps that use machine learning and that are learning from my behaviors. So it's really interesting because data science is, or machine learning is super sneaky, but it's sneaky cool.
Sneaky cool, I like that. And another question is, what are problematic things you think in the field?
Couple things I can think about. So what's problematic about data science is that it has become such a ubiquitous term. And so, it's really important to have integrity in data science these days and really talk to what you know, but also what you don't know. I think that becomes more and more important as data science grows as an industry. The other thing that's problematic is sort of, you have two opposing forces. Because on one end, you have all of these cool new technologies in data science that are growing, right? You have new machine learning libraries that are developed every single day. But then on the other hand, you have regulatory and ethical concerns that you have to think about that are slowing down the progress of data science. So there are two opposing forces at work here. And it's something that we should all think about, as we're doing data science and as we're working with data, what are the privacy concerns that we should be thinking about, and how should we solve for problems in ways that are ethical becomes more and more important.
Right, and I know there are several people in this meetup who are interested in that, like ethics and also applications for good in data science. Do you actually have any things to say about like what you think about how data science can be used for good?
So that's a really cool question, because I was at PyData a couple years ago. Have you guys heard about this? Anybody? Bueller? One person? PyData is a conference that happens every year. And it's a chance for you to go there and learn how to code in Python. And it's some pretty advanced stuff, which is really cool. So they had a guy that came to PyData and was talking about how he's using machine learning to solve for problems related to prostitution and human trafficking. And I thought, that just gave me chills. Someday I hope to go back and actually help him for free and work with him. So there are many uses of data science and machine learning and modeling that can be used for good.
Right, and there's actually a lot of organizations that you can join and volunteer for. There are some applications that come out for, I don't remember the name now. I could send out an email about them, but yeah, there's a lot of people who are super passionate about this, and it's a very talented team of data scientists who are doing like these amazing projects for good. Also, you mentioned before that you are in charge of like interviewing and finding data scientists. Could you talk a bit about what you look for in a data scientist? Like what makes a great data scientist to you?
Yep. So two areas, right? There's the technical stuff. You got to have your foundations right. You got to be able to code in some language. Oh, no worries. You got to be able to code in some language. You got to be able to tell the difference between X model and Y model and how it applies to a business problem. So that's the foundational stuff that I look for from a tech skill perspective. The more important thing to me, though, are the soft skills. So you need to be someone, in my opinion, that has integrity, right? That can say, I don't know, that can collaborate with people around you and learn from each other and teach each other. And then I also look for empathy and kindness, because it's really interesting, but as you develop your technical skills, sometimes you can ignore the softer side, but the softer side is just as important, if not more.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. A lot of data scientists who are like super eager to start, they sometimes focus only on the technical stuff and they memorize all these algorithms and things like that. But definitely coming from the business perspective, like what problem are we trying to solve? Why are we doing these things? What's the best thing to use? Definitely that a lot of times differentiates it. So when you've been interviewing people, what kind of things would you say differentiated the best candidates that you saw?
So the best candidates are candidates that tell me what they know, what area they know. So they've built a brand, right? They're like, I'm an NLP expert, or I know everything there is to know about regression, or I solve for client problems and I can take, any model and like tell you what the business value could be or how to solve for business problems. Whatever it is, I need you to be able to go deep. So that's really important to me. And then I usually throw questions that have nothing to do with that area, just to see if that person will say, I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer. That's a very important quality that I look for too.
Right. So digging deep to like, yeah, and I've heard a lot of times if you have something on your resume, be prepared to talk about it, like very specific things about your projects. It doesn't matter if you have like all the knowledge you need to know about the whole field. It's just for the stuff you work, like understanding your thought process and how you kind of made those decisions is super important.
And passion.
Right.
Passion is also super important.
So do you also have any recommendations for books, podcasts, or different resources that you recommend?
So there are so many out there. I'm not really going to make a recommendation for a data science blog. I'm sure you guys can go online and search for it. But how many of you have read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Yay! I recommend that book. Here's why. It's a science fiction book. It's got some interesting anecdotes that really teach you a lot about life. There's one that I love. In the book, the author is talking about learning how to fly and how humans should learn how to fly. And essentially, he says you should go to the tallest building and jump off. And at your moment of greatest fear, distract your mind from the fact that your body is about to hit the ground. And if you're able to do that, then you will learn how to fly. And I use that every day in life because it's about facing your fears, right? If you can distract yourself enough to do the thing that terrifies the shit out of you, you're going to do really, really well, no matter what it is.
Absolutely agree with that. That's kind of how I got into. I just like kind of jumped in there and figure it out. But that's a good thing. People look for that all the time, like figuring out things on the fly.
And as women in data science, as women in the tech field, you know, there are a lot of voices out there probably telling you that you're not good enough or that you don't fit. And so, you know, we internalize those fears. So it's very important to be able to face those things and say, shut the fuck up. I can do it. And I will do it. And I will own my own badassery.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely think that when, like, even if first impressions can be important if you're a woman in the field, but once, like, if you're super eager and you know your stuff, or you're confident and you're eager to learn the things that you don't know, people will respect that. And once you establish yourself in a team, like, you'll have friends and they'll understand. And it's not really as much of a case then. So definitely, even if you don't know everything, just stay confident and stay eager and passionate, and people will recognize that and encourage you and help you out. So that's super awesome. One other question.
So while you're looking up the questions, also build your village, guys. Find other women and men who are there to support you. I can tell you that I'm sitting up here and I sound super confident because there are people in the audience that have helped me practice and that have told me that I'm going to be awesome, and I believe them. And that's why I sound the way I do. So find your village. It's really important.
Yes. So what's one thing you wish you knew when you were first getting into the data science industry, and also when you were a few years in?
Yep. So going back to that flying story, I wish someone had told me that every single person that's in the workplace today that is doing something new feels the same fear that I did the very first day that I tried to do a data science project in real life. You know, that would have probably helped me and made me feel a lot better. And I wish somebody had told me to build my village, right? Again, finding people at different levels within the organization who will hold you up when you feel like you can't do it, or who will help you find the skill sets or the websites or the things you have to look up in order to solve for a problem. I wish I knew that when I had first started out. A couple years in, I wish someone had told me to go out and find champions. You know, I've always heard that you should go out and find mentors, but mentors and champions are totally different. And I wish I had known that there is this thing where there are people that will open doors for you and that will advocate for you. But you have to go out and find those people. It's not always going to just be good luck, right?
And actually, especially if you are showing, that sometimes could even happen naturally if you are super eager, like I said, and like just talking to people, really genuinely excited to learn all of these things and apply data science to everyday, like those people will come. So super awesome. So now I'd like to open it up to Q&A from you guys. So does anyone have any questions? Yep. Yeah, so what's the most interesting myth you heard about data science?
This is a funny question because, you know, there are terms that people use that have come to mean data science. For example, the definition of AI. When I think of AI, I really think of robots in the future that mimic humans. And so when I first started hearing that term, it confused me a little bit. I don't know if it's a myth. I think that you can, you know, because data science is such a wide field, you can definitely say that you're potentially doing some version of AI. But I would say that's one for me.
Yeah, like the idea of like general intelligence and like meeting humans. Yeah, we're very far from there, but
Right, very far.
Yep.
I've done a lot of data science interviews. I've conducted them and I've done them. And I've never been asked for a portfolio. Usually I've been asked only for my resume. Now it is true that you will get tests to do. Sometimes they're on site, sometimes they're off site, and you just have to prep for them. But honestly, if it is a super difficult test and if you're being asked a lot of trick questions, that might not potentially be a place you want to work at.
Yeah, and actually, I come from a very untraditional education background. I dropped out of college and I kind of worked myself to data science, and now I'm at Udacity. But portfolio was actually super helpful for me, trying to prove what I am able to do through my projects. And a lot of the times, like when we said we'll dig deep into like what you specialize in data science by seeing what your previous projects were, just you can pick whatever. I think your portfolio, there's nothing like very specific that you have to do as long as you're very passionate about it. And I think it definitely helps to have something like some interesting visuals in your portfolio, like whether that's like a web app that you can interact stuff with, or like really cool visualizations. I generally think that is very helpful. And also, if you talk, like we mentioned, it's helpful to have that business perspective when you're doing data science. So if you could come up with a problem that you have a genuine interest in and you're trying to figure out on your own, and it's not just like a generic data set or generic machine learning model that you're building, I would say that's very helpful to see how that you can think that way when you're applying for a job, especially if you don't already have a lot of previous data science experience. We had a few more questions. Yeah. So the question was, how important is it to have a degree or certificate versus being self-taught?
Not that important if you're really, really good, but then a portfolio becomes kind of important, right? Because you do have to prove that you know your stuff.
Right. I would definitely say like a lot of, depending on the company, sometimes more corporate companies, it's like a requirement to have. But I also think it depends on who you talk to. Like sometimes if you talk to recruiters, they'll be like, oh yeah, we require this. But if you talk to the actual people who are managing the data science team, they're more interested in what you can do and want to see what your portfolio is. So I would say if it's like a clear like nope, you don't have a degree, maybe you don't want to work there. or maybe it's a very research role, like research specific, who want people. I mean, there are places where it is very valid to have that requirement, but there are also plenty of jobs. And I could say I don't have a college degree even. I studied computer science. I dropped out after a year, and I did like a boot camp, and then I just started doing data science projects and stuff like that. So definitely, it is possible.
Yeah, and I'd say, most people these days don't really look for that. It's much more important to be able to know what you're doing and talk to it. There are, like you were saying, big companies that require that, but honestly, you'd probably want to join startups anyway.
Yeah, and not it doesn't have to be necessarily small startups like high growth startups too. I mean, like generally anyone with that culture, I think.
And is Databricks a startup?
Yeah, I mean technically very high growth startup. It's like 600 something people. That's where my next job is actually. but yeah, and also actually being self-taught is a huge advantage. If you can say, I've learned all of this stuff in the past 3 months. Here's a project I built from scratch on my own. I learned how to build all these models on my own. I learned how to deploy it on AWS on my own. That is a very valuable skill. And that's actually something that like when I was interviewing at Databricks, they were really like keen about, like how what is my like learning process? Can I pick things up quickly? That is a very important role because each company has their own like niche and like specific methods and stuff like that, and they need people who can ramp up quickly. So if you show that curiosity and ability and like aptitude to develop those things really quickly, I would say it is a very good advantage.
And networking, that'll get you a much longer way than anything else,
right.
really.
Yes, definitely. And you guys have a huge career right here.
Yay.
Any other questions? Yeah. What specifically do you mean?
It depends on what you're trying to explain. Generally, with people like that, it's good to talk about the business outcome or the business value of what you're trying to solve for, because that's all they really care about. They don't really care about what algorithm you're using or how messy your data is, right? And so I would say stick stick to the outcome and stick to the value, and you should be good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Actually, I think if you put in too many like buzzwords and hype stuff there, you might get them in for the wrong reasons, and I've seen that in
Or
a few
lose
companies.
them.
Yeah, um, yeah, I've definitely seen people get like really excited about hyped up stuff like that without anything. But yeah, definitely communicating the business value. And I saw some questions back there. Yeah, so the question was, how do we see privacy and security kind of play into this field in the future?
So, how many of you here have heard of GDPR? Yeah, right? It's a big deal. It has tightened the way my old company uses data because we have offices in Europe and completely changed the way we do business in the United States. And so, Europe is leading the way when it comes to data privacy. Um, I think that the US needs to follow quickly behind, but at least if the US doesn't, companies need to follow quickly behind because a lot of companies that you work with, if they're large ones, are have headquarters or offices in Europe and or are planning to grow there. In terms of healthcare, that's an industry where privacy is a big issue, and from that perspective, there are ways to deal with it. But I definitely think that privacy is important not only from the perspective of regulation but also ethically. Um, how many of you have heard the story of what happened with Cambridge Analytica, right? So perhaps if we were all in that situation, we might have made different decisions or made the same decision, but really it's about making ethical decisions, and that's becoming more and more important.
Yeah, which is why I also think it's a very important thing that more women are becoming like into senior roles and higher positions in data science, so we can come together and talk about these things. Not to say men don't, but I'm sure they both do. But I'm sure a lot of us have a lot of concerns about that, and we can bring out new perspectives from like just like a female perspective. So definitely.
I think what you're saying is diversity of thought and
Yes.
diversity of people is really important. Yes, agreed.
Absolutely.
Agree.
Any other questions? Yeah. Absolutely. So the question was, what are the key attributes that like women can bring in as a data scientist as opposed to just being a data scientist?
So that's an interesting question. I think that women tend to be more collaborative, and that's a huge one in data science as we continue to grow. Women tend to be more empathetic, but I think I'm also generalizing a lot here. What I'd say is that what women bring is diversity, right? And any sort of diversity of background, of gender, of thought changes the game and improves the quality of any work that we're doing because we get a chance to collaborate together and challenge each other and learn from each other.
Definitely. And the nature of data science is a lot of people like to say that data is objective. And because we train these models on data, it's objective. But in reality, our data is biased. And if your data is based off of a lot of tests that you've run on men, or just like men, like there are some considerations that are like biological differences or differences that we have in our everyday lives that aren't being applied. So I know like there were some VR studies or something. It's like I think it was something about the way men and women perceive death differently, and like women were getting dizzy or something because the way it was calibrated was adjusted for men and it was tested by men, built by men. So just having like ultimately the customers and people affected by all of these innovations are both men and women. So it's important to have both there because of those differences and biasing the data.
Yeah, that happens a lot in healthcare and pharmaceutical companies. Actually, initially, a lot of the tests were run on men, and a lot of assumptions were made. So a lot of the medication that's out there is based on tests run, on one gender or by one gender, and that has definitely affected the way we use medicine today.
Right. And in general, I would say data science is a very creative field. It's very technical, absolutely. You have to know all the algorithms, how to use them, but in the end, it's a problem solving with a lot of different tools you can use, a lot of different strategies of getting to where you want to go. So having just the different like lifestyles that women have, or the different problems that they see every day, or like encounter in families, or encounter just like just specific needs of women, that's introduced, like that's a whole like set of data they can introduce into these projects. Any other questions? Back there? Yeah. Was the question, do you have mentors and how did you find them?
Mentors or champions? So mentors and champions. I'm lucky enough that I'm an extrovert, and so going out and finding mentors and champions hasn't been hard, except that I haven't been differentiating it really. I've only been going out and finding mentors for the longest time. And it's only recently that I realized that champions are super important. I have had one or two people in my career that have really inspired me. But honestly, it's only after I've come to Solemn that I've met people that have really championed for me and advocated for me. And it's made a world of difference to my life, my sense of happiness and well-being, but also my professional development. And so I've gone out and I found them, but I've also been really lucky in finding them. So I'm telling you guys to do something that I haven't done, but wish I had, which is gone out and really looked for them, look for champions.
Yeah, and whether that's through the meetups or I'm sure there's a lot of people who already help each other in like this network, and in general, people you work with as well. I've had some, I'm not sure, I would say mentors, or at least people who did that for me, inspire me and make me like really feel confident about myself. And it's just like seeking out those conversations, like, and not like asking for advice, asking for help, or asking for feedback on what you're working on. People who are in positions that are the same as you or higher than you, people are willing to share. People are willing to help if you ask.
So I really want to make sure that we differentiate between mentors and champions, because mentors will give you advice. Champions will open doors for you and find you opportunities and advocate for you. And that is a completely different thing. And when you find one, you will know the difference. I have one or two people that I would say are advocates and are champions for me here at Slalom. And it has completely changed the game for me and changed the way I see the world around me. And I definitely want to do that for other people. So I would say go out and look for that. It is hugely important.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, how do you keep your skills up to date when there's always so many technologies and skills coming out without necessarily always jumping onto the next thing?
Specialize. Don't try to be good at everything, because that's like impossible. Data science is massive. I don't know a data scientist that is good at everything. So there are data science blogs that talk about the latest projects out there. There's the Kaggle stuff. Pick one or two areas that you feel like are new in the industry and focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does generally help to and I think if you kind of see what kind of topics you gravitate towards when you want to work on personal projects, there's so many different applications and paths in data science. Really whatever excites you most, and then just trying to stick on top of that, I guess.
And then get your fundamentals down, right? Know the difference between or know what a p-value is, know what a confidence interval is, know what a t-test is. Like, you got to get your basics right. After that, you just specialize, because remember, it's all about building your brand in the space that is this wide space called data science.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, that does make it very important that and you'll get better. It'll be faster and faster for you to do that, because if you keep learning really quickly and you're discovering all these tools, you'll just get very good at jumping to new things. Other questions? Yeah. Great question. So where do we get our passion for data science and what made you stick to it? And what do you think you'll leave behind?
Those are heavy questions, man. Passion for data science. So, statistics came super easy to me, which is really funny given how scared I was of math when I was young. What I liked when I was in school and doing my master's in statistics, I remember a moment where I realized that a lot of what we do in statistics is trying to mimic patterns that happen in nature. That really blew my mind because I'm not a very religious person, but I think the closest you can get to God is math and statistics. I know I sound like such a nerd here, but it's true because it's only through mathematics and statistics that we've been able to go out and reach the stars or even explain human behavior, right? It's crazy how much statistics and math is part of everyday life and explains a lot of the world that we live in. So that's what makes me passionate.
That's awesome. And I agree. Data science is just very, very powerful and there's so many applications. I would say we were mentioning before, how data science could be used for good. I know right now it's being used for a lot of small social justice problems or help a lot of the crises that we have today. I would really love to see. It has so much potential, and not a lot of people are using it yet. The people who have the best data science, or the highest advancements in machine learning stuff, are all in big tech companies. And I do think that a lot of tech companies are taking initiatives now to work towards good. But I haven't figured it out yet. But I would love to. That is why I partially dropped out of college, and I'm trying to figure out all these things. I'm trying to figure out that connection, but I don't know yet.
I think there was a second part to the question. Do you remember what that was?
Oh, what would you like to leave behind with it?
I don't know, man. People who like me. That's a hard one. I will say professionally, what's important to me is to build a path for other women. Because sometimes it's so hard. It's so hard when you're sitting in a room full of men and, you feel minimized, and you feel underestimated and you feel excluded all at the same time. It's so hard. And I just hope that with what I'm doing, I'm supporting the women around me right now, but also potentially forging a path for other women that want to enter this field, and it will be easier for them. That is something I'm super passionate about.
Totally agree with that. Any other questions? Yeah. What's next? But yeah.
Yeah, so I stopped apologizing for being female, number one. All the women that I've talked to, say about 80%, tend to underestimate themselves. So it's your internal monologue, right? It starts there. Tend to use phrases and words that minimize their experiences and their knowledge. And the worst that I've seen is when women are in competition with each other, when there are already so few of us. So I've changed the internal monologue, and I tell myself I'm badass all the time. And I do it in a private way with myself, with my relationship with myself, but I also do it publicly. I own my space. I own what I know. And I don't internalize other people's opinions of me unless and until they've earned my respect. And in that case, yeah, I'll listen. So I think it's very important as females to stop apologizing for being us, for wanting things. We are all working hard, right? A lot of us have families. A lot of us have left our families back in India, i.e. me. And we all come to work and work really, really hard every single day. So we should have equal opportunity. And so, again, it's getting past that fear, right? What's going to go wrong if you ask?
Yeah, I would definitely say that is a skill that we have to develop, and it's definitely a little harder as women, especially now because we're so underrepresented. Like I know there were experiments done where they had like a biography of a person who was, and they replaced the name with a female name and a male name, and they asked people like, "What do you think of this person?" And I think the male name was like, "Oh, go getter, like super ambitious, whatever." And the other one was like, "Yeah, she got a lot of help from like mentors. She seems a little bit bossy in certain things." Like the perceptions are definitely different. Like that's a fact right now. So I would say being able to position yourself to be very confident, but not coming across as like, I don't know, like a know-it-all or something like that is definitely like a fine line sometimes. And I could see how that's a little bit like tricky to navigate. But
I would not be afraid of coming across as a know-it-all. That's the first problem. Don't be afraid of people saying you're bossy or coming across as a know-it-all. Because trust me, there are both men and women out there that will appreciate that. And there are women out there that are learning from that and learning to be women that can ask for what they want because they watch that. They watch you, right? So don't be afraid of that. If you're in a culture where that's not appreciated, start educating people. It's more about if you have a manager that says you're bossy or you're a know-it-all, it's time to educate that person, and you have to figure out how to do that. So that's on us because we are pioneers. But I would say don't be afraid of being who you are. You know, I got told a lot that I was bossy. I don't give a crap. I am bossy, yeah. So what? And I found men at Solemn who had told me that one of the reasons I was hired was because I'm the kind of person that asks for forgiveness, not permission. So there are people out there that will appreciate you for that. So be you, be who you are, be your authentic self. That's really, really important. Don't let other people's dialogues about you or what you are change who you are.
absolutely. And also, if you do come into a situation where people are like preventing you from moving forward, actually another thing that helps is just looking outside, like seeing what other opportunities are out there. And if you come back with other offers, like sometimes if you just say like, "Hey," sometimes you have to prove to them like, "I've gotten this, this, and this, so I'm getting there." And I mean, that's how I kind of went up a lot of the time. That definitely helps because no one can question like, you are obviously valued at this much at other places. Like they want to match that. So that can really help too, like not depending solely on this one employer.
And remember how I talked about perseverance? I mean, if you are seen a certain way, it will take you longer to get to the next level and get to where you have to go. But that's where perseverance plays a part. And that's, again, something we just have to do as pioneers. I don't have a better answer for it, but I can say that if you do persevere and continue to be authentic, it will get better.
Right. And I know another issue that you might come across is like, you don't want to be someone who, like, you are obviously passionate about what you're doing. You are really interested in the job. You don't want to come across as like, oh, I only care about money. I only care about stuff like that. But if you do get other offers elsewhere, you can still like say, be honest and say like, I do really love my work here. I would love to continue, but it's difficult for me to accept this if I'm being offered and valued more at these other places. Like, can we talk about this? And that generally helps. Other questions? Yeah.
So that's a great question. Couple things. As a manager, don't be afraid of emotion. If you have women that you're managing, you will get a lot more emotion from them than you will from a man. Just because we have been trained by society to behave in certain ways, right? Do not be afraid of emotion. That just means that women care. And look beyond that. Encourage your women, the women around you, whether they're your peers or they're your leaders or they're women that you manage, to be bossy, to ask for what they want. A lot of women that I have mentored over the years tend to, again, apologize for who they are and minimize their own accomplishments and skill sets. So look for those words and phrases where they do that and push back.
Yeah, and recognition, really. Like just recognizing their efforts, recognizing their talent, things they've achieved and congratulating them, maybe even sharing that with other people. I know definitely there have been men in the past who have done that for me. which really helped. How do you deal with people who take credit for your work?
Damn, did that happen to you? Sorry that happened to you. That has not happened to me. So that's a hard question for me to answer, but I would say that, you got to have a conversation with a person, give them an opportunity to explain why they did what they did. And if it feels disingenuous, then I would just go above their heads and talk to your manager about what happened. I can't give you a full answer here because it's not happened to me, but hopefully you're in an environment that's supportive. So if you're not in an environment that's supportive, that's the first problem, right? Yeah. That will happen to you all the time. Yeah. You persevere in the face of that. It doesn't mean that you are less than. It just means, again, that we are pioneers in this field, and that is going to happen to you. It's how many people have had this happen to them were in the room where you've had colleagues that are, not at your level or perhaps junior to you and that have gotten promoted above you. Yeah, it happens. It happens. It's going to happen. Nothing you can do about it except persevere and learn from it. And again, finding an advocate goes a long way. I cannot stress that enough.
This kind of ties into what you were mentioning before about how men can help. Because actually, if you think about why people take credit and succeed in taking credit, or people surpass you that shouldn't be surpassing you, it's really about how you present yourself and what recognition you give yourself, what recognition other people can give to you. But being vocal about your achievements and being proud of what you did. Like when you did something well, share, like be vocal. I know a lot of women, when they do something like awesome, they're like, it wasn't that great actually. Like there was some cool part, but honestly, it wasn't that. They were like, this part was easy. Like, no, be proud, share. Like share what you did, get excited, share people about that excitement. If you're talking about these things with people, people will recognize you, but that's on you. You have to be vocal about that stuff.
I love that you said that. That's absolutely right. I've been talking this whole time about finding champions, but you got to start by being your own freaking advocate. Like that's number one. If you're not going to advocate for yourself, you're always going to be in a headspace where you feel like you're less than, and you're not. So you've got to be your biggest champion.
And don't ever feel like you're always going to feel like, I don't know if this is like amazing enough for me to share. Like maybe, like, I don't know. I know a lot of people feel like a fraud sometimes. Everyone feels like that, especially women. So just embrace what you actually did. Be proud of what you did. And sometimes the smallest things that weren't that difficult to you are actually kind of impressive. And sometimes it's not about doing things that are necessarily very difficult. It's the fact that you took initiative to put it all together and came up with these like creative solutions. So there's a lot to be proud of. Any other questions? Probably wrap up a little soon. Yeah. Yeah, what is the day-to-day like in a data science team, and we use Agile and the project structure?
So in consulting, it's a little bit different, right? It depends on the client you're on. Different clients use different structures. We tend to prefer an agile methodology. The day-to-day, that's a hard one to answer because it depends on the problem you're solving for. Sometimes it's more about the modeling. Other times it's more about the data. Actually, 85% of the time it's more about the data, right? We all know this. And so really depends.
Yeah, it's definitely like an active like discussion right now. Like, what are the best practices for stuff? And data science is in this like weird in between stage where it has a bunch of stuff from academia and data science that don't quite fit into software development practices. But now like people are really bringing in stuff to like productionize data science better and like follow software engineering principles. So that's definitely like a very active discussion right now. I guess we'll have a couple more questions. Yes, that's good.
Please drink some wine.
Yeah, so I guess on this officially ends at 8:30. So until then, feel free to just come up, talk to us, or just network. But thank you guys so much for coming.
One more thing I want to say, just a shout out to all of you for being here.
Yeah.
We have some people from various companies here too that you should chat with. I know we have some people from Children's Hospital, Pinnacle, I believe Go Code is here. Oh, yay.
From Davida.
So please go talk to Davida, you said? Davida's here. Great. So please go talk to those companies as well. I'm sure many of them are looking for badass data scientists.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Oh, that's so nice of you guys. Yeah, thank you so much to Slalom for all of the accommodations that you guys had for us. Can we give a round of applause for Slalom? Thank you, everyone.